I remember the way the light over the stove hummed a thin, nervous sound while I stirred a pot of fish sauce and garlic, the steam turning the kitchen window into a fogged mirror. Outside, evening pressed itself along the fence like a tired cat. Inside, the house smelled of jasmine rice and detergent, a domestic mix I had always loved. My son, Min, sat at the table snapping green beans like tiny sticks. My daughter, Anne, colored a princess in a blue dress, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth. It was an ordinary Thursday, the kind that dissolves into all the other ordinary Thursdays a married woman keeps in her bones. From the hallway, I heard the basement door wheeze and close softly, too softly for the wind, too carefully for an accident. I tightened my hand on the wooden spoon, told myself it was nothing, and tasted the sauce anyway, letting the salt climb my tongue. In our house, the basement had always belonged to storage and laundry and winter coats. It held spillover things you meant to keep but didn't need every day. I had never thought it would hold secrets. My sister had moved in 2 weeks earlier, dragging a carry-on with a broken wheel and a smile that tried too hard. Mai looked smaller than I remembered from our last holiday, cheekbones sharp, wrists thin, her hair cut blunt at her shoulders. "Just a few months," she'd said at the doorway, eyes sliding past me to take in the home, the framed school photos, the tidy shoes lined up like quiet mouths. "Until I get back on my feet." "Of course," I said, because I believed in sisters, and I believed in our mother's voice that still echoes. Family is the net that catches you. I believed in being the eldest, the steady one. I believed in love's duty. Tuan came home that first evening with an extra bag of oranges, his way of welcoming. He hugged her like a brother-in-law should, one arm and a polite distance, and told me later, while we brushed our teeth, "It's good you brought her here. It'll be good for the kids, too. More hands." I wanted to believe him. I tucked that approval into my chest as if it were a warm stone. Life smoothed itself around the new arrangement in small ways. Mai took over the school run in the mornings, her voice bright and silky as she buckled the kids into their seats. She filed my receipts while the kettle hissed, reaching for a kind of usefulness that made me think, she wants to be needed. At night, she cut fruit into perfect fans, the way our mother used to, and the children clapped because the slices of mango looked like suns. There were good moments, too. The first Saturday after she moved in, we stood at the sink together like we had when we were teenagers, rinsing bowls while rain walked across the roof. "He still leaves his socks everywhere?" she teased, flicking water at my cheek. I laughed and bumped her hip with mine. Tuan, at the table, pretended to be wounded. "I am a changed man," he said, and grinned at me. It beamed through me like a lamplight. That grin, I had loved it since I was 26 and late to a bus I didn't mind missing because he was on it. We were not perfect, but we were ours. The first changes were so small I almost missed them. Tuan started coming home just a little later than usual, apologizing with tired smiles and the promise of a weekend activity with the kids, the park, the movies, the cheap noodles at the corner stall. He smelled less like office coffee and more like the green, clean scent of the laundry room. "I ran a load of towels," he'd say, slipping off his shoes. "Your sister is so helpful. She's got a system down there. I didn't want to mess it up." Mai, for her part, began to know our house too quickly. She knew which light switch was fussy and needed a double tap. She knew the squeaking step on the stairs and how to step on the edge, where it breathed quietly. She knew Tuan's schedule better than I did, somehow, and once, at breakfast, corrected him gently when he forgot he had a late meeting on Wednesday. "You swapped it with Friday, right?" she said, sliding a plate of toast to him, and he blinked as if realizing she was right. I told myself it was gratitude. I told myself she was overcompensating, trying to show she wasn't a burden. I told myself she was younger and quicker and had always been good at rhythms. I had watched her, growing up, memorize dance routines in a single afternoon. This was just another routine. But the sound in the basement that Thursday evening was not the washing machine. "Mom," Min said, holding out a snapped bean, "like a crocodile mouth." "Very scary," I said, taking it, forcing a smile. I went to the stove and lowered the heat. The sauce sighed. When I turned, Tuan was standing in the doorway, hair damp, as if he'd just showered, tie loose around his neck like a tired ribbon. He was smiling the way men do when they want to soften their entrance, a half tilt of the mouth. "Smells good," he said, eyes lingering a second too long in the hall behind me, toward the basement door. "Dinner in 5, I said. "Can you call Mai?" "I think she's on the phone," he said, casual, and slid past me to kiss the top of Anne's head. But when he thought I wasn't watching, his gaze drifted back to that door. Not guilty, not afraid. Just aware. I kept that observation the way I keep ginger peels for tea, aside, to steep later. When we sat to eat, Mai appeared like she'd been upstairs the whole time, hair clipped back, cheeks pink. She scooped rice onto the children's plates with the easy tenderness of habit. "I'll take the late laundry shift," she said, as if there were shifts, and Tuan made a small sound of approval. That night, when the house quieted to threads the clock, the fridge, the slow breath of children, Tuan turned on his side and pressed his back against mine. "You're tense," he murmured. "Long day," I said. "You're late a lot lately." "It'll settle," he said. "End of quarter. You know how it is." I did know, or I had always thought I did. I had loved him across promotions and pay cuts and a miscarriage. I had loved him when we were too tired to unbutton our clothes with anything but gratitude. I had loved him into this house, into the laugh lines near his eyes that used to fold only for me. I let his steady breath pull me into sleep, a little ache under my ribs like a warning bell I couldn't interpret. Days folded. Mai inserted herself into our rhythms more completely, offering to run errands, returning from the market with Tuan's favorite yogurt and the soft bread he joked he couldn't resist. Once, I found them in the living room laughing at a ridiculous game show, their knees angled toward each other in a way that made me pause at the doorway, invisible for 1 second too long. It was nothing. It was something. It was a snapshot I tucked away without labeling. On Tuesday, my mother called. "How is your sister?" she asked, voice papery with age. "Is she settling?" "She's helpful," I said, and heard the hollowness inside the word. Helpful can be a softness or a knife. The kids adore her. "And Tuan?" "Busy," I said. "You know how quarter ends are." A pause. "Don't carry everything by yourself," she said, and I smiled even though she couldn't see it. That Friday, I was home early, a small gift from the universe my client postponed. I decided to surprise the kids with their favorite fried chicken, the kind that shatters under your teeth, oil whispering on the paper bag. The house was quiet when I came in, a settled kind of quiet. I set the bag on the counter, eased off my shoes. From the ceiling above the kitchen, a faint vibration, the washing machine spin, maybe, or a footfall. I glanced at the basement door. It was open a 1/4 inch, as if it had breathed and never closed its mouth again. "Hello?" I called. Nothing. The word reached down and came back empty. I told myself Mai was reorganizing the shelves. She had a passion for that, her hands, small and quick, turning chaos into stacks. I picked up a plate, then put it down. The first time you turn the knob on the door to your own basement and hesitate, you feel foolish. You are a wife, a mother. It is your house. But there is a particular kind of fear that knows your name and your habits. It whispers, "Don't look, not yet." If you don't look, you can still be the version of yourself who doesn't know. I looked. The steps groaned, old wood speaking old complaints. The air grew cooler, smelling of dryer sheets and concrete and something else, citrus, a crisp aftershave I could not place. A light was on. I heard low voices, a murmur smoothed by walls. A laugh hers, soft and bell-like, the kind she used to charm teachers when she was late to class. I misstepped, and the stair squeaked like a mouse. The voices stopped. In the pause, I heard the feathered sound of breathing that knows it has been heard. Then a scuffle, a click, the light snapped off, dark poured up the stairs, and I was standing in a night I had not prepared for. "Lynn?" Tuan's voice floated up, practiced, calm. "Is that you?" My mouth was dry. "Yes," I said. The word cracked like old paint. "I brought dinner." "A beet." "We'll be right up," Mai's voice added, sugar dissolved in water. I stood there, one hand gripping the rail, and watched the square of darkness below, as if it were an eye. I stepped back into the kitchen, heart thudding like a trapped moth. On the counter, the fried chicken waited, patient, fragrant, unjudging. I reached for a plate and realized my hands were shaking. When they came up, they were composed. Tuan's hair was damp again, his shirt changed. Mai had a laundry basket at her hip, an apology tucked into her smile. "We were sorting the winter coats," she said. "You know how dusty it gets down there. I finally got around to it." "Thank you," I said, and placed chicken on plates like we were actors who had to hit our marks or the scene would fall apart. Min and Anne bounded in from the backyard with grass on their socks, shrieking with delight at the smell of dinner, innocence like armor, and I told myself again that I had imagined the way silence swallows, and then lets go. After the children were asleep, Tuan kissed my neck in the hallway, familiar, a choreography we had written together long ago. "You okay?" he asked. "You seem far." "Just tired," I said. "Long week." He nodded and went to brush his teeth. In the mirror, his reflection met mine for a second, two people, parallel, slightly blurred by steam. I thought of the basement light going out, with that tiny click, how practiced it sounded, how quickly it came. I lay in bed later with the window cracked, the night peeling back in layers the motorbike on the far street, a dog's bark, the hush of a sprinkler. My heart drummed in my ears. I reached for the old comfort. Lists, tomorrow's schedule. Groceries, the email I needed to send, the kids' reading logs, the small life that made up the large one. I could feel the shape of a question forming in the room, the way a storm gathers even before the leaves turn their pale undersides to the sky. I decided then, something simple and hard. I would watch. I would not accuse air. I would not throw a match into a room that might only be shadow. I would watch the places where the house breathed and the people I loved moved, and I would let the truth, whatever it was, show me its face. On Sunday, we went to the park. The sun lifted itself over the trees like a careful promise. Mai pushed Anne on the swing, her laugh rising with the arc. Tuan sat beside me on the bench, thigh warm against mine. He handed me a paper cup of iced coffee, the kind with too much sugar. "Peace offering," he said, grinning. I wanted to lean into that grin, to let it be enough. The coffee was sweet and cold, and for a while, the day was just a day. But later, when we came home and the children ran ahead, I found a button on the hallway rug, small, pearl, the kind from one of Mai's cardigans, and beside it, on the baseboard near the basement door, a smear of something like makeup, the color of quiet roses, tiny things, little witnesses, proof, or almost proof. I picked them up and held them in my palm until they warmed. The washing machine purred downstairs, steady, obedient. The house waited, breathing, and I understood, with a clarity that left me both relieved and afraid, that my first lie, the one about the washing machine, had already become a habit. It was time to choose another way. The next few weeks blurred into a polite routine, the kind that looks normal enough to fool everyone, even yourself. Mai was radiant, not in the way a woman in recovery from heartbreak should be, but in the way someone newly adored becomes, cheeks faintly flushed, movements light, eyes bright with unspoken laughter. I noticed it one morning while pouring coffee, the way she hummed, the way she pressed her fingers to her lips, hiding a smile that had no reason to exist. She caught me watching her and said, "What?" "Nothing," I replied too quickly. Tuan walked in, tie half done, distracted. "Can't find my navy folder," he muttered. Mai set her cup down, reached into the drawer behind him, and handed it over without missing a beat. "You left it on the dryer." He blinked in surprise. "How did you—" "You always leave things there," she said, teasing. "It's your second desk." They both laughed, soft and intimate, and something in my chest twisted, not sharp yet, but enough to leave a mark. That night, when I folded laundry, I found a lipstick stain on one of Tuan's undershirts. Not bright faint, like the ghost of a mouth. The color wasn't mine. I stared at it until the lines blurred. Then I did what women like me are taught to do. I found the logical excuse. Maybe it brushed against something in the laundry basket. Maybe one of the kids had played with my lipstick. Maybe. Always maybe. But the truth doesn't stay buried. It rises, slow and heavy, like bread in a warm kitchen until one day, it spills over. It was a Thursday again when the next crack appeared. Tuan came home later than usual, hair slightly damp, a smile stretched too thin. I had made dinner, but it had gone cold. He apologized, said traffic had been awful, said he'd already eaten something small at the office. From the hallway, I heard Mai's voice, low, carrying a tremor of something that sounded too much like guilt. "I'll put the kids to bed." I watched him. He avoided my eyes. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the rhythm of his breath beside me, memorizing it slow, steady, practiced. When he finally drifted off, I slipped out of bed and stood at the window, staring at our backyard bathed in silver moonlight. The basement window glowed faintly. I watched it for a long time, as if the house itself were breathing secrets I wasn't supposed to hear. The next morning, I called in sick. After the kids left for school and Tuan for work, I brewed a pot of tea and sat at the kitchen table. The air smelled of detergent again, the basement smell. It clung to everything lately. Mai came down the stairs, humming. She froze when she saw me sitting there, already dressed, eyes on her. "Morning," she said. "Morning." She poured herself tea, hands trembling slightly. "You're not at work?" "No." "Needed rest." A beat of silence stretched between us, soft but dangerous, like a wire under tension. "Mai," I said quietly, "how long have you and Tuan been in love?" Her spoon slipped against the cup with a sharp clang. "What are you talking about?" she said too fast. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "I'm talking about the way you laugh when he walks into a room, the way you know his schedule better than I do, the way you both come up from the basement at the same time." Her throat worked as she swallowed. "You're imagining things." "I wish I was." She turned away, gripping the counter, and I saw the tears she didn't want to shed. "Lynn," she whispered, "I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean to what?" I asked. "Didn't mean to betray me? Didn't mean to destroy this family? Or didn't mean to get caught?" The air between us went still. She faced me then, eyes rimmed red. "You have no idea what it's like living in your shadow. You, the perfect sister. You with the perfect husband, the perfect home. You saved me out of pity, not love. I just wanted to feel chosen." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had always thought she needed protection. Maybe she needed to be seen. "You chose him," I said, "but he was mine." She broke down, sobbing into her hands, the sound raw, desperate. I watched her cry, not with cruelty, but with the numb disbelief of someone whose world has already fallen once before. "Where is he now?" I asked quietly. "At work," she said between sobs. "Good," I said. "Then pack your things before he gets home." Her eyes widened. "Lynn?" "No scenes," I said softly. "No explanations to the kids. Just go." She opened her mouth to argue, but saw something in my face, a calmness she couldn't fight. She nodded, silent tears streaking her cheeks, and turned away. I sat at the table until I heard the front door close and her car start. Only then did I allow myself to cry. Not the loud kind, but the small, shaking kind that comes from deep inside your ribs. When Tuan came home that evening, the house felt too large. "Where's Mai?" he asked, glancing around, trying to sound casual. "She left," I said, voice steady. "Said she needed to move on." He froze. "She told you?" I looked at him, then really looked. The man I had trusted, loved, shared every quiet morning with. His face was pale, his eyes darting everywhere but mine. "You don't need to explain," I said. "I already know." His lips parted, 1,000 excuses ready to spill, but none came out. He sank into a chair, head in his hands. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. "It never is," I replied. The silence that followed was thick and honest. He looked up, eyes wet. "Do you hate me?" I thought about it. The question was too simple for what I felt. Hate would have been easy, sharp, clean, final. What I felt was heavier, a grief with no funeral. "No," I said quietly, "but I don't love you anymore either." He flinched like I'd struck him. That night, he slept on the couch. I stayed awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sound of rain tapping against the window. Each drop sounded like a second ticking toward the life I no longer recognized. When morning came, the sun was mercilessly bright. Over the next few days, the truth seeped out like spilled ink. My mother called, her voice trembling with disbelief. My friends spoke in soft condolences that tasted like pity. The children asked when Auntie Mai was coming back, and I told them she'd gone to find a new home. I filed for divorce quietly. There were no shouting matches, no thrown plates, just paperwork, lawyers, and the slow dismantling of 17 years. But in the quiet, something unexpected began to grow. Space. Space for breath, for stillness, for the version of myself I had lost somewhere between cooking dinners and forgiving too much. Sometimes, healing doesn't roar, it whispers. It sounded to me like the soft hum of a washing machine in an empty basement. It's strange how silence becomes its own kind of companion. After Mai left and Tuan moved out, the house grew still, not empty, but listening. The hum of the refrigerator became a heartbeat. The creak of the hallway floorboards sounded like the memory of footsteps that no longer passed through. Every object seemed to remember something: the dent in the couch cushion, the lipstick-stained mug left in the sink, the faint outline of his slippers by the door that I still hadn't thrown away. At first, I told myself I would fill the quiet new music, new routines, new noise. But eventually, I realized the silence wasn't my enemy. It was my teacher. Each morning, I woke before the children, brewed tea, and stood at the window as dawn softened the edges of the sky. The light that spilled into the kitchen wasn't the same. It was clearer somehow, less filtered by the illusion of what used to be. For the first time in years, I didn't cook breakfast for anyone but myself. I didn't wait for someone's schedule, someone's preferences, just me and the slow rhythm of my own hands. Still, healing is never linear. There were mornings I woke up forgetting he was gone, reaching instinctively to the right side of the bed, feeling only cool sheets. There were nights when I dreamed of laughter in the basement and woke gasping, half expecting to hear them whispering again. And then there were the questions. Endless, torturous, circular. When had it truly begun? Was it that night at dinner, when he said she looked tired and she smiled too long? Or earlier, when I first saw the way her hand brushed his shoulder, casual, almost familial? Or had it started with me, my exhaustion, my quiet neglect of my own needs while taking care of everyone else? Some days, guilt slipped in dressed as reflection, but I refused to let it stay. Because that was the trick of betrayal. It makes you search for fault lines in yourself that were carved by someone else's choices. One evening, about a month after the separation, I found Mai's old scarf tangled at the back of the coat rack. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, jasmine, and rain. I held it for a long time, then folded it neatly and placed it in a box. Not to throw away, but to let go. The divorce came quietly, finalized on a rainy Tuesday. I signed my name on the last page, and the lawyer said, "You're free now." Free. It sounded too light a word for something that had cost so much. Freedom was lonely at first. It echoed in the hallways, pressed against me in the evenings when the kids were asleep. But slowly, I began to understand it wasn't loneliness, it was space again. I went back to work full-time. The first week, my colleagues gave me soft looks, the kind people reserve for the recently wounded. I smiled through it, let them think I was stronger than I felt. But one afternoon, as I presented a new project, I caught myself gesturing passionately, voice steady, confident the way I used to sound before marriage, before motherhood, before my life had been split into careful compartments. I saw the surprise in my manager's eyes, and in that moment, I realized I had returned to myself. 3 months passed before I saw Mai again. It was at our mother's birthday. I almost didn't go, but family ties are strange threads. They fray but rarely snap. She arrived late, thinner than before. Her once bright energy dimmed. Our mother's eyes darted between us nervously, as if afraid we'd ignite the room just by being in it. Mai approached me slowly, hands trembling around a small envelope. "I didn't know you'd come," she said softly. "I almost didn't." She nodded. "I wanted to apologize. Again. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but—" "Stop," I said gently. "You've said it enough." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was jealous of everything you had. I thought if I took it, I'd finally feel whole." "And did you?" I asked. She shook her head, eyes falling. "I destroyed the only person who ever truly cared for me." Her voice cracked, and for a second, I saw the girl she used to be, the one who hid behind me during thunderstorms, who whispered secrets under mosquito nets at night, who begged me to braid her hair for the first day of school. I sighed and reached out, touching her hand lightly. "We both lost something," I said. "But maybe we can still protect what's left for the children, for Mom, for ourselves." She looked up, startled. "You forgive me?" "I don't hate you anymore," I said quietly. "That's enough for now." It wasn't absolution, but it was peace. That night, after the family dinner ended and the laughter of cousins faded into the walls, I drove home alone. The city lights smeared gold on the wet pavement. I thought about how forgiveness isn't about excusing someone, it's about freeing yourself from the story that hurt you. When I got home, I walked down to the basement. The air was cooler, still smelling faintly of soap and dust. I flicked on the light, that same bulb that once blinked on the night I discovered them. Now, it was just a room. Boxes, tools, a humming dryer. Nothing more. I stood there a while, letting the hum settle into my bones. The same sound that once made my heart race, now oddly comforting. I smiled, a small, private smile. Because the same space that once held betrayal now held nothing but quiet. And that quiet belonged to me. A year later, I moved into a smaller home closer to my office. The children adapted quickly. They painted their new rooms, picked out plants, filled the space with laughter again. Sometimes, Tuan called to check on them. He was polite, distant, apologetic. We coexisted like weathered stones in the same river, worn down, separate, but no longer jagged. As for Mai, she moved to another city. We spoke occasionally, cautious, careful conversations that tiptoed around the past. Time, I learned, does what forgiveness can't. It softens edges. There were moments when I still caught myself wondering why. But then I'd look around my new home, the books stacked neatly, the quiet hum of the evening, and I'd realize the answer didn't matter anymore. Because peace isn't found in explanations. It's found in acceptance. One Sunday morning, Anne brought me a drawing. It showed a house with a big sun, 2 stick figure kids, and a woman with long hair standing beside a flower. "Is that me?" I asked, smiling. She nodded. "You're happy again," she said simply. I looked at her, my daughter, who had seen more than she should have, and felt tears rise. "Yes, baby," I whispered. "I am." And I meant it. That night, I brewed tea and stood at the window like I used to, watching the moonlight fall across the backyard. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard a washing machine hum, soft, steady, untroubled. It wasn't my house anymore, but the sound made me smile. Because I knew now, some things break you to rebuild you, and some betrayals, no matter how cruel, set you free.